that is making it hard.
Advanced mail say.
Do they tell you about them? Yeah, and they don't even know about like manufacturing.
Okay, guys, we're live.
But I told them I would
We
tell
need to go
you.
back. Here we are.
Yeah.
Well,
It's-
welcome back, everybody, the Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. It's still Wednesday. We've just had a very stimulating joint hearing with House Commerce on Vermont manufacturing and some of the challenges that they face and some of the things that make it unique and fabulous. But right now we're going to pivot to something actually that was discussed in our meeting. We're going to pivot to a bill that has been proposed by our own colleague Wendy Harrison, and we have our council here to join us. Welcome, Wendy, to Senate Economic Development.
I'm at Senate
We
Economic
miss you
Development.
too.
Thank you.
It's good to have you.
Madam Chair.
Take it away.
Okay, so this bill, which you might have in front of
It's
you.
on our desk.
88. It's a bill that would create an additional veggie incentive. There are two veggie incentives currently. You may be aware of this. And this one, the mechanisms used in this one are the same that are used in the green energy incentive. I didn't want to make something that was too far out of bounds. And the purpose of this, it's a and actually I should say Vermont Employment Growth Incentive Program. And it would be an incentive for locally owned and controlled employee-owned businesses. And the idea, the theory behind this is that co-ops and other employee-owned businesses are less likely to leave the state.
Right.
And so the state gets a better buck for its investment because they won't move out. And generally, they're better employers in terms of pay, employee pay and benefits. And they also typically benefit their towns and local communities more than other companies. So you might want to take testimony on that. So, and just as you're probably aware of Chroma. I don't know if you're aware of Chroma. It's a really amazing company that has received veggie, and it's also an employee-owned company. And they went to that. They became an employee-owned company when the original founder left, and they are just doing great things. And they're very happy that they became an employee-owned company. So you might want to use them as an example too.
How would they use this incentive? I mean,
Well, they
Give us
won't use, I mean, I don't know if folks can use the incentive more than once. But they could speak to veggie and to being a employee of too. They might want to specify. I haven't talked to them about this.
so what is the enhanced incentive?
So what the enhanced incentive is the same type of incentive as the green veggie incentive, where they get a higher amount of the net benefits, and Ledge Council can explain that. But it's just to encourage people, more businesses to apply for veggie, because we haven't had as many applications as we would like. And when I say we, it's just because I serve on the Vermont Economic Progress Council, which is the group that reviews veggie. And I did talk with the agency about this too, so they are aware of it.
Oh, great. Sure. Any questions for Wendy before we pivot to Rick? Great, Wendy, thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for your
Thanks for your
service on
consideration.
Betsy. We are so grateful because she's our Senate rep and our House rep now is who?
I don't know.
Abby Duford.
Oh, that's right. Abby is the new, thank you.
Well, you can keep this. This is a new manufacturing company in the state.
Yeah,
That
they
They made
manufacture
their
company.
interpretation, and I told them about economic development.
Oh, great, terrific. I wonder,
Quality.
well, they must have been. Rick, welcome.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Rick Stagel, Office of Legislative Counsel. So you all have S88 in front of you. I can share my screen if you like, or you can just look on the paper. So I think Senator Harrison explained pretty well. This is basically a copy and paste of the environmental technology business current enhanced incentive that exists under the VEGgie program. And the way these enhanced incentives work, I can't provide the exact math. I can give you the numbers, but normally when you do the calculation as to how much the percentage is, you calculate the share of new revenue growth by 90%. So that's the enhanced. 80% is the typical calculation. Whenever percentages come up, I'm not your guy to explain how that works. Typically 80% enhanced is 90%. So there's an extra 10% there. And then payroll, when you calculate payroll for the enhanced incentive, you calculate it by additional 20%. So how much money that actually is depends on the exact application that the company applies for, how many people they have, what their expected revenue growth is. There is this formula that is used by VEGgie that JFO consults with that helps calculate these final numbers. So these current worker co-ops can apply for regular incentives, but this would give them an enhanced incentive, a little bit more money based on what the senator said the purpose is for doing that.
And do we have anything in the bill that would help market it to our co-ops and locally owned and managed businesses, having just come from a room full of them?
Nothing in the bill that would provide for marketing. That's something we can discuss if you look at that.
Because I'm just concerned because, with Bessie, it's only two people really. And so if we're not, if Green VEGgie is undersubscribed, regular VEGgie is not undersubscribed, I don't think at the moment. Anyway, we'll have Jessica in and talk. David, you have a question? Oh, sorry, I thought you did.
I think I saw an eyebrow raise about the numbers. And again, that's something that you may want to have VEGgie come in and testify to is how that actually looks in reality.
How it actually works. I think all of us
Yes.
need a refresher on how it actually works.
Right. But just for this, it's the same exact incentive that you call Green VEGgie. I've never heard it called Green VEGgie before. The environmental technology business. It's the same as that program.
But it's undersubscribed at the moment.
I don't know that for sure, but you'll want to take testimony over that.
Are you done? I didn't know if you.
So I didn't do a formal walkthrough, but the one thing I would like to ensure is if you look on page 4, when we have the actual language for the enhanced incentives, I was trying to be overly inclusive of what a employee-owned business is, and you can see using a couple of federal law definitions of what an employee ESOP, employee stock ownership plan.
So we have that in statute already when we created this opportunity.
Well, so we have. Are you talking about just the ESOP?
Yeah, I mean, that's in statute, isn't it?
Well, we have the worker cooperatives under just subdivision 2, line 15.
Yeah.
The reason I have these different definitions is because I want to make sure we're not missing any organization. And I would suggest you take testimony to ensure that we are including who you want to include under these quote unquote employee. I'll say this, we don't have the definition of an employee-owned business in Vermont. So it's not like a universal definition. So this is my attempt at kind of combining several different ways that you could define that type of entity. And you can read and see what you think about those.
That's puzzling to me, let me know. Given how much we've done to enable that universe.
So the definitions in here for employee owned companies and such. But what's the intent of the incentive? I'm not getting the whole thread through this bill to understand what we're really.
Well, maybe I should do a walkthrough then just to make sure we're all on the same page and how.
Sure.
Yeah.
We have time to do it.
Sure.
So let's go.
Veggie in general or just this, enhanced veggie?
So I certainly understand employee-owned companies. So I was a member of one for 10 years. You know, quite great setup. I'm just wondering, what's the point here? You know, we're introducing a definition, but where is it going? Where does this bill go?
Sounds good. So let's start on page 2. I amended, we're in statute 3330 in title 32, basically, subsection B, that last subdivision D, saying that there are a handful of these enhanced incentives. You can see A is the labor market area incentive that has higher than average unemployment or lower than average wages. That's a current incentive. We have that version of the bill. It should be page 2. I'm on line 5. Good. Yeah,
So that currently exists.
that current.
And when I was on veggie, that means in areas, not Chittenden County where the labor rate was pretty low, there was a more of an incentive to, or do the employers get more of a benefit, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. So B on line 9, that's your green veggie, the environmental technology business. C is an enhanced incentive that was repealed several years ago. D is this new incentive for an employee-owned business. So that is that new language. On
So
Yeah, okay.
so in summary, we're adding a new category, trying to incentivize employee-owned businesses. Okay.
That's right. Yeah. We already have this incentive program,
Yes.
enhanced incentive program, for these A and B, and this would be a third new program.
If I may, really quick. So in my experience is that veggie's kind of underutilized. We don't get a lot of applications for it. So it's a tool, it's in the toolbox, then can attract more employers here, but I don't think there's a lot of employers that take us up on the opportunity for a variety of other compounding reasons. So this was just to expand the interest level of possible veggie incentives.
And really to encourage companies that are already here and anchored here and going to stay here.
Yeah.
Which go back to Wendy's point. To take advantage of this economic development tool.
On the top of page 3, the definition of qualifying job, I added this subdivision 2, an employee of an employee-owned business pursuant to this new section, which we'll get to in a second, just to ensure, because if you look at subdivision I on the previous page, this would not include employees of an employee-owned business. So I had to add a new definition that says, or these people who are normally not considered as employees of a qualifying job, to make sure for that enhanced incentive that these people are considered to have a quote unquote qualifying job. And this goes back to the calculation that we do, the formula we use to calculate payroll, to calculate the incentive.
I'm sorry, I'm just gonna stop you there, but the Romanettes 1 and 2 don't, these are all for employee owned, but the intention, I think, of the bill, I thought was locally owned, and it may be not employee owned, it may just be locally owned. So are we also trying to incentivize locally owned business, which is not all employee owned necessarily?
Question for the sponsor, but the bill as written would be just employee owned, which may not be quote unquote locally owned.
But its purpose seems to.
So if you take a look at the purpose at the end of the bill on page 6, the comment in that purpose language is that it typically provides, those businesses like that typically provide higher wages and benefits to their employees. And that's the issue, is enhanced incentive for employee-owned businesses meeting this business format, at least that's what I interpret, is more likely to have higher wages than even other locally owned businesses. Is that,
Yes.
does that make sense?
I believe that's the case. We will get to that. Okay.
Shall
Going.
Okay. On page 3, I added language, including this new enhanced incentive, saying that there is a other potential enhancement, that needs to be considered. Nothing substantive there, just saying that we have this other enhanced incentive to consider. Same thing on the bottom of page 2, lines 18 and 19, that we have this other third incentive that could be calculated. On page 4, this is new language, a new statute, 3335A. So again, subsection A is the definition of employee-owned business. And again, I'll just reiterate, for my purposes, I would like to hear testimony to make sure I got this right, that I'm including the right organizations, and that you want these organizations to be covered by these definitions. Just quick run through, subdivision 1 is the ESOP plan, a company that has an employee stock ownership plan as defined in federal statute, or a worker
So
cooperative.
ESOPs are defined in federal statute,
Yes,
but not in our statute.
no,
It's not
there may be a
possible.
cross
This
reference.
opportunity, I thought we.
I'll double check.
Okay.
Sorry. No, that's fine. Worker cooperatives, which would also be included as a quote unquote employee owned business. There's also a federal cross reference, 26 USC 1052. For R, that we do have a definition here, of our own worker cooperative that's organized under 11 VSA chapter 8. Or kind of this catch-all, an organization that meets the following criteria. I, employees of the organization constitute a majority of its membership. II, members of the organization hold a majority of the voting power. Members of the organization have the authority to elect a majority of the board of directors on the basis of one person, one vote. And for the organization allocates a majority of its allocated earnings and losses to members on the basis of patronage, capital contributions, or combinations of 1 and 2 of this subdivision. So again, that's meant to be ensuring that if you have an organization that's not formally organized as a worker cooperative, that maybe they still are quote unquote an employee-owned business. And also important that they seek an incentive for a enhanced incentive here. Starting with subsection B, line 11, this is again exactly the same language that the environmental technology business enhanced incentive gets, which means that one, when you get this application, when the council receives application for this enhanced incentive, the business's potential share of new revenue growth shall be 90%. Normally it's 80. To calculate qualifying payroll, the council shall determine the background growth rate and payroll for the applicable business sector in the award year. Multiply the business's full-time payroll for the award year by 20% of the background growth rate. And C, subtract the product from the payroll requirement for the award year.
What's the intent of this language, this section?
So it'd be helpful to look at, I can pull up on the screen if you want, to see the normal calculation of a regular incentive. You'll see that it's 80% of the revenue, and you'll see the comparable language for the payroll calculation.
So this is all about figuring out what the incentive could be.
Yes,
Is
Yes.
what it's supposed to be.
yes. It's the word enhancement is appropriate.
So this isn't changing at all the qualifications to get a veggie. This is just adding an additional aspect for an enhanced veggie.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe I need a refresher on qualifications to get a veggie, and I'm Googling, but I don't know.
I think actually it'd be great to have Jessica in and talk about the whole veggie program, because I think we need to appreciate how it's doing. If Green Veggie is undersubscribed, and why, if she has thought on that. And then also, if we're going to add another enhanced program, does she have, has there been demand for this? Is this something that there have been, that ESOPs have been coming and asking for? And how if things are undersubscribed, what are we doing to further encourage companies and market this opportunity for companies in Vermont?
Can we, I was just talking to Megan Sullivan about this. Can we have her in?
Yeah,
When
with
we-
Megan and Jessica.
That would be great, because I hope this is a vehicle to just reopen the conversation about how to make veggie more effective and permanent.
I agree. But David.
No, good.
No, I was just gonna say, I agree, but I think we have to sort of reappreciate it that way. And sort of, we haven't talked about it really at all this year. And, I think that would be perfect.
So are employee-owned companies now excluded from the current bid?
I don't think so.
Or
They
that's just
it's-
calling them out for further.
Gives them more of an incentive.
To a program we hope would help them grow
There,
and flourish.
there are, application requirements for veggie in general. They're not explicitly, banned from applying or receiving the application. But I think it would be helpful to hear from the people that receive these applications and talking about the pros and cons of
And
the.
we heard this morning that the administrative challenge with them is it's not
Insignificant.
insignificant is the word I'm looking for. Thank you. Insignificant soils and significant administrative challenges. And so I would want us also to look at, in addition to the enhanced incentive, what we might do to for some of these companies, particularly I want to also explore the locally owned, not just the employee owned. How we might reduce some of the administrative challenge. So I think let's invite Jessica and Megan in and have a veggie update and look at this a little more in depth and to see what it actually, how it would help. David, you are looking puzzled.
I'm always a little.
Yeah.
Me too. It's okay. So let's start with Megan and Jessica, and then we will. If we're interested in taking this further, we're lucky to have a former member of Betsy here at the table, which is great. And that's helpful. And Wendy, as a current member, is seeing this as an opportunity. So I think it would be interesting to explore it further and certainly enhances our economic development. Great. Terrific, Rick. Thank you very much.
Anytime.
So we are now going to shift.
When we have this conversation.
Yeah.
I think it would also be great to have a primer on employee-owned businesses for new members.
Absolutely.
They're just so great.
They are so great, and we really encouraged and promoted, and that's why I was so surprised we don't have a definition statute, because we went through sort of setting this up as a, and encouraging them in so many ways. But anyway,
I'll double check.
Okay.
After.
So Senator Robin, so I don't really need a primer on employee-owned businesses, because I
Have
was
you worked
in one for 10 years.
Oh, okay.
Highly motivating environment. What I don't understand probably enough is veggie.
Yeah.
yeah,
And
and I think that's what we're.
Well, I'll just say for myself, I like to check in with our employee-owned business development center to see, how they're doing, what they need, businesses that are transitioning, generational turnover. We just haven't talked to the employee-owned business.
No, we haven't. This is a
Development, but-
good opportunity to do that. Great. So thank you very much, Rick.
See what
And we are going to welcome Lucy to the table. Thank you, Lucy, for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. I'm for two. But I
Oh, that's one for Heidi.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I brought one back.
Oh, nice.
We didn't think.
Oh,
that-
okay. I was like,
Well, great,
Yay.
so I get
Good.
Yeah.
we don't need that much cheese. I would have taken it.
Lucy, welcome.
Hi.
It's good to have you. Do you know all of us?
So.
Okay, good. Not everybody always does. And you were the reporter of the cannabis bill this year, coming from House Gavoff. And it is H 321. And I think Heidi, do we have 321?
It's right here.
Okay.
It's also online.
Great, terrific, fantastic. So, as new members may or may not know, we have jurisdiction over the retail, over the business aspect of cannabis.
Well, we also have jurisdiction over cultivation, and I wish agriculture would take that over. We have it.
Yeah,
That's different in the house.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
yes, it is different in the house. It would be nice to separate it out. But at the moment, we have this bill, and Lucy, would you be kind enough to share with us what it accomplishes and why we are addressing these needs.
Absolutely. Just for the record, I'm Representative Lucy Boyden. I represent Memorial 3, which is Cambridge and Waterville, and I'm coming to you from the House Government Operations and Military Affairs Committee. So as you mentioned, H321 relates to miscellaneous cannabis amendments. And with the cannabis market being an emerging sector, this bill acts as a vehicle to address issues brought forward by freeholders to help stabilize what is widely thought and agreed to be a successful implementation of legal cannabis. So just to start out quickly, the vote count out of committee was 10-0-1, and it passed through the House floor on a unanimous voice vote. Overall, the bill has a lot of technical adjustments, things that weren't caught in past years that are now just being put in statute, and some cross references from like the agriculture statute, which I believe is Title 6, and just putting it in also where cannabis is located. I was thinking I would just touch on some like highlights of the bill. That way,
Except for this is sort of, sort of technical correction kind of bill,
Yeah.
but it could be more. And so the question is, what, where are some of the most exciting parts?
Absolutely, yeah. So I would put you towards section 4, which amends the rulemaking authority of the Cannabis Control Board in 3 instances. The first being it establishes new licensing criteria for changes in ownership, control, or location of a cannabis establishment. The second being it amends, it directs the Cannabis Control Board to consider regional population and local input when issuing retail licenses. So we had originally considered a legislative moratorium on retail licenses, but heard from the Cannabis Control Board and found this to be a better solution.
Was to locate them more thoughtfully.
Yes.
Thomas.
So I represent part of Burlington, and I have heard from constituents. I'm neither endorsing this perspective, but there is a concern of an oversaturation of pot shops in Burlington. Does this language speak to that, giving the Cannabis Control Board to consider the saturation of the market?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would definitely, you're going to hear from the Cannabis Control Board, obviously. And they can touch on this more. They're already in the process of rulemaking around this based off of legislation from last year in the cannabis bill. This is just a little more specific to consider the regional population and also the local input of the community. So hearing from folks that are in those areas as well. Yeah. And then the third part within section 4, also establishing rulemaking authority for a new license type, which is the trim and harvest license. Some of you, I believe, attended the Cannabis Roundtable put on by the Lieutenant Governor, and something we heard from folks at that event was the need and want for additional folks to help with the harvesting seasons. So this license type hopes to address that need and want. I'll next point you towards section 7, which allows the Cannabis Control Board to issue a temporary license to operate a cannabis establishment in the event the owners of a license are unable to continue operation due to incapacity, bankruptcy, dysfunction, or abrupt closure. So I'd also point you towards the Cannabis Control Board, but something that they were dealing with was what to do with a business when the owner goes through one of the issues I just stated, and what to do with the inventory and just the business itself, that transition factor.
This is anything that's a major disruptor to the business's continuance.
Yeah.
So it could be divorce, it could be death, it could be long-term incapacity, whatever.
Yeah, and the more specific details there have a temporary permit to a appointed individual to figure out the next steps of that business, whether it be closing, transfer of inventory, all that types. Next, I'll point you towards section 14, which removes the reporting requirement for the auditor within Act 164 of 2020. This report related to the organizational structure and membership of the Cannabis Control Board, and whether the structure continues to be the most efficient for carrying out their statutory duties. It was decided upon, mainly from hearing from the auditor, the deputy, at that this report was not needed. As the Cannabis Control Board has effectively developed systems, performance benchmarks, and engaged with an outside consultant to evaluate their internal organizational governance structure.
Right. And remind me, let's see what section that is.
That is section 14.
Got it.
And then lastly, I'll just point you towards section 15, which creates one full-time enforcement attorney position within the Cannabis Control Board in FY26. And this position will be dedicated to managing the agency's increased enforcement caseload. So allowing the board's current attorney to focus on rulemaking.
And how did that fare through the appropriations process?
It went well. Something that the Cannabis Control Board touched on was that they do have some vacancies within their organizational structure. So the position kind of pays for itself, and also the board is self-funding. Also, they see this as the market is growing, they're seeing more need for enforcement, and so they're generating more fees. I think that's correct word to be using, and violations just because of the market expanding. So there is a bit of revenue coming in. That's like some of the large highlights, but happy to take any questions.
Right. Anybody have a question for Lucy before we go to Michelle? And we do appreciate the fact that there are a lot of asks that are going to be coming to this committee around this bill and looking at this bill as a vehicle for additional work. Did you have time to listen to all those additional pieces, and what were the reasons your committee chose not to take those up?
Yeah, we were dealing with some capacity issues just with coming off of the Bennington House District freeze, looking at that and preparing for everything else that we needed to go deeper dive into. Yeah, and just wanting to look at this as a stepping point for the growing market, and figuring out the timeline for as the market grows, what is right for the market.
Right, Thomas.
I think I just heard you say capacity, so you just with the
Committee.
crossover, you didn't have as much time to address everything.
Yeah, just committee wise, especially since we spent the first third of the session talking about Bennington.
We had some other issues.
Yeah.
Yes, Keisha.
Well, I think then it sounds like we'll just talk about some of those other issues, because I'm really still concerned about the free speech issues we heard about last biennium on advertising and things like that. But Representative Boyden, you had also reached out before crossover. I tend to bundle the vices together because I feel like it's a reminder when we bring these to the floor that, we could have an illicit market that's unregulated, and, we don't want that. And so we often try to remind our colleagues, let's bring things under regulatory framework. And so we end up having multiple conversations at once. You had some alcohol changes that you had proposed on the House side that didn't make it. Is that right? And we now have Senator Westman sort of looking at helping you introduce those on the side. Do you want to speak to those?
I kind of don't have them quite in front of me at the moment. They just addressed to somewhat technical changes brought to myself and Chair Byron from the Department of Urban Monitoring.
Okay.
So that's interesting because the department has chosen not to present a bill this year.
Yeah.
And so I've been thinking about it for next session because they had nothing pressing last time I spoke to the commissioners.
Yeah. So
Nothing pressing for this year.
yeah. Chair Byron and I had a conversation with Commissioner Knight back in early December or so, and just getting an overview of what their priorities were coming into the session. And we took feedback from that conversation, introduced the bill together.
Right.
In additional conversations with the DLL, those are not super large priorities of things that need to get done this year.
Right.
I think that's kind of
Sort of.
But Commissioner Knight tends to look for ways to help the industry, rather than just like priorities for what she needs to do for jobs. So.
Thomas.
Did you think from the start of your question that those could be germane to this, that we could consider them and possibly add them onto here?
Anything's germane in committee.
Cool.
Well,
Like-
maybe. That's a good question. I'm not sure it fully is. But anyway, there are lots of issues, as you will hear, that actually are directly related to cannabis that will be coming, that are in this room at this very moment. And will be being introduced as we take up this bill. So we have, there are a lot of, I know there are several asks anyway, that for us to consider like this.
Yeah, and you have the resource of the lieutenant governor right down the hall as well.
We have a fabulous resource right to my left.
Oh, yeah, yes, absolutely.
We have that, and we have one right to your right.
Now I'm okay. Doing here.
Okay.
5 weeks in the call.
So thank you, Lucy, so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for carrying the water on this issue this
No
year. I
problem.
understand you were a great help.
Yeah.
And the chair, so thank you very much.
I'll stick around in case there's any.
Oh, that would be great, because we're gonna have Michelle go walk us through it and just look at what some of these sections are. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us. It's great to have you.
Sure to be here.
And Michelle, you, I assume now know everybody else.
I do.
Okay, great.
One committee or another. Good morning. Nice to see everybody.
It's good to have you. I think this is your first visit to us this year.
It is.
Welcome.
It is. Thank you so much. So for the record, Michelle Childs, Office of Legislative Counsel, and I'm going to do a section by section, but I realize you got a tight schedule and I've got like 20 minutes. So if you need me to slow down, let me know, but I'll take you through the draft.
This is great. This gets us started, then we can.
Yeah. So looking at the bill as passed by the House, so section 1 is making an amendment to the provision in current law regarding the ability for law enforcement to seize cannabis that's possessed illegally. And you'll see there is the addition on line 8 of 7 and 8, adding that it's not only cannabis that's possessed in violation of state statute, but also administrative rules. Because as you know, administrative rules has the same force of law. And this is just kind of something that's kind of been in there, a little bit of an oversight. And the board, you've given the board to pretty broad authority to adopt administrative rules. And they do a lot on a variety of issues around being able to seize cannabis that's adulterated, or if it's in violation of the cannabinoid, I can get all the right words, but yeah, the hemp derived products, things like that. So this is really just a technical, because I think the original intent was that if it's being possessed in violation of law, then it can be seized. Section 2, this is having to do with background checks. So I know those of you who have been on this committee and have heard almost on an annual basis about the struggles that the CCB has had with obtaining criminal background checks from the FBI, and it's not just Vermont. It's been a number of states that have had trouble. There's 2 requirements: is that under current law, and the way that you initially created this system in 2020 was that anybody who's going to be participating through the licensed market has to have a criminal background check. The state has had a hard time getting those background checks from the FBI.
You mean once they've been taken, once people filled out the paperwork, getting.
Yeah. So it has to,
as well.
you have to have something in statute, and then the FBI, because the CCB is not a law enforcement agency, so it's not like the sheriff, requesting information from the FBI. It's a non-law enforcement agency, so there's issues there. So I think almost every year they come back with a new proposal, and they're working with other states to do that. So the language in section 2 and add the addition of subsection B is just part of their attempt to trying to get the right language in there for the feds, so that they can obtain those records from the feds rather than from a third party.
So we hope this will speed it up.
Yes, and I'm sure James can speak to that when he appears before you. So section 3, this is You might recall that I think it was last year, in the miscellaneous cannabis bill, there was an amendment to the definition of hemp products and hemp-infused products, clarifying around the board's ability to regulate products that have a high THC content but are derived from hemp and not from cannabis. We made that change in Title VI, which is your agriculture title, and somehow just slipped our mind to make that same change in Title VII. So this is the same exact definition that you passed last year, and that's included in the agriculture definition of hemp products, and we're just replicating it here in Title VII. So Section 4, this has to do with rulemaking. And while Section 4 starts on page 3, I'm going to skip you all the way to page 6 to the amendments. So the way that this is organized is Subdivision 1 lists the types of rules that will apply to all cannabis establishments. There's a number of licensees, and then it goes subsequently after that, I'll say, and these are specific to retailers, and these are specific to cultivators. So if you look on page 6, the first change, and Lucy already spoke to it, is that this has to do with requirements and criteria governing license applications to change ownership, control, or location. Or actually, she talked about the receivership business. But so currently, if there's going to be a change in ownership, you have to reapply for a new license. This would allow them to develop rules to amend a license rather than having to go through the whole new application process. So they'll go through rulemaking on that. Subdivision 5, which starts on line 16 on page 6. These are the rules concerning retailers. And as Lucy had mentioned, this language is tweaked there. So right now you have location or siting requirements that increase geographic distribution of new cannabis retail establishments based on population and market needs. And it's been tweaked a little bit. So we're not just talking about new cannabis retail establishments, all cannabis retail establishments based on regional population, market needs, and community input. So something to remember there is when you initially adopted the cannabis regulation structure, required towns to opt in for retail sales. So you kind of have, because you have that as the foundation, you wind up having clustering in the towns that have approved retail shops, and they may be surrounded by a bunch of towns that have not. So you'll see clustering. And again, I think the board can talk to you more about their efforts to try to have a more perhaps dispersed retail offering for the establishments.
And that's on page 7? No.
No, that's at the bottom of page 6 on subdivision
Okay, right.
5F.
Got it.
Top of page 7, there's a new subdivision 9, and this pertains to the new trim and harvest service license. These are folks who provide seasonal support during the harvest time. And this would be a new license rather than a company that isn't licensed through the board now providing services to those licensees. And so these would be the specific types of things that the board would need to adopt rules on with regard to that new licensee. Section 5, this allows for third-party background checks. Again, it is the board's intention to be getting these criminal history records from the FBI. But until that is happening, you have allowed them to get them from third-party operators. That's not their, I think, first choice. I'd rather get them from the FBI, but there's just some language here to clarify around it that if they don't have an option to get it through the FBI, that they can't be using the third
So
party.
the FBI delegates its authority to the third party.
No, the state wants to get the records from the FBI, but if the
Right.
FBI will not provide them to the state is getting the records from third-party operators.
And the records may
So-
not always be available, I assume.
I would direct that to the chair about their experience with the third-party operators.
So I guess we'll ask Pepper what, give us an example of a third party operator. I mean,
Companies that aggregate
an
records.
aggregate, oh, okay, so it's they're data brokers.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, our favorite. Thank you. Okay.
So I'm going to move on to, let's see, the next section would be section 6. It starts on page 9, and this has to do with cannabis establishment ID cards. So just like everybody who's working in the industry has to have a background check, they have to have an ID card. A couple of years ago, you created some language to allow the board to kind of issue a temporary license or permit for someone who has applied to be an employee of a licensee, but maybe they were still working through the paperwork and waiting on the background check. And that language that you had in there is mandatory currently. That starts on line 5. You see language that's struck. This is more permissive. Is that the testimony from the board was that things are going much quicker now, and so there's less occasion to have to issue those temporary permits. And so this is just changes it from mandatory to discretionary language.
The language that's here or elsewhere in the underlying bill, when they have been unable to get the FBI criminal record check for whatever reason, is there any requirement for them to go back on all the people that they haven't had the FBI check and get it redone? As
You
opposed
mean
to
like
relying
once
on
the FBI says, "Oh, you finally met our test"?
Yes,
No.
okay, well, that's something we should think about that we ought to, because the third-party tests are inadequate in that the third party do not have access to the same records that the FBI has in many cases.
But if the FBI isn't actually doing a
Well, yeah,
job.
what I'm
for
saying
it,
is that once the FBI
problem.
does indicate that Vermont's requirement is an acceptable one to them to be able to provide records, and that appears to be the problem they've had in the past. That at that point, should we go back and ensure those people who have not been checked by the FBI get checked by the FBI at that point? That's what I would recommend.
We will certainly ask Pepper about it.
So still on page 10, section 7, as Lucy mentioned, there's a new process in here for addressing situations when a business is experiencing some problems. You have a lot of people coming to the new market. Not all the businesses will succeed. And there's really nothing in current law of how you address that. And so you wind up perhaps with a retail store with a lot of cannabis, and what do you do with it? And so this allows the board to appoint someone. It could be someone who's currently licensed by the board or who's not, but who the board has vetted and deems appropriate to have a temporary license to basically unwind the business, to like dispose of the inventory, to pay creditors and do those types of things.
I don't know if this is the right question.
Yeah, Tom.
You know, if this was inspired because they're having a lot of issues with that.
I think some issues certainly have come up, but I would say the board should be the one to talk to you about their experience about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this isn't really succession planning. This is more business interruption planning.
Yeah, I think just like you said, it could be a divorce or someone dies or someone is hospitalized for a certain amount of time and there's employees that need to be paid and there's
Business that needs to be done. It
Exactly.
just needs somebody to manage it as it goes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
Thomas, yeah.
where I'm coming from, and when the board comes in, I'd like to inquire of it. I do have many constituents concerned about the amount, the number of pawn shops in Burlington, and if they're being stood up only to fail and have to be unwound pretty soon thereafter, I wonder if we might need to talk about higher thresholds, or how do we do it with liquor stores, or what are the other considerations when we allow for these shops to come online, so that we're not seeing them just start up and only have to be unwound through processes like this. So that's where my mind would be coming at in these discussions with the board.
Right there.
Again, so do we have these types of stipulations, legislation for other sensitive industries like ammunition, weapons, explosives, alcohol?
I don't know. This is not typically with kind of receiverships and bankruptcy and things like that is not what I generally work on, but I can certainly follow up and ask.
Just curious, see what motivates.
I mean, I think
that's a
Cannabis-
question for Pepper too,
Yeah.
because they came with the
Okay.
requests. I believe
Yes.
most of these, Lucy, isn't that right? That the CCB came with most of these requests.
Most of them, and then other ones also came from people within the industry, so business owners.
Right.
Or
And so we'll get the witness, how do you get the witness list from your committee and thank you.
So next pages are on page 12 on section 8. And so this is, you'll see in subsection D on line 14. So currently you have 7 types of licenses. You're adding a new one, which is the trim and harvest. And so there's a few other sections where we address the trim and harvest, but this is just adding the trim and harvest license to the statute. Just a note on page 13 that, currently, again, when you establish the system, you limit folks to only one type of each license. So we can't have like 5 retail licenses and 5 shops all around the state. You can just have maybe 1 cultivation, 1 retail, or whatever kind of mix you want. And there's just some language here that clarifies that if you have a trim and harvest license, you're permitted to provide services to all the different types of licensees. So it's not like you can just serve one farm, you serve a number of cultivators.
It does strike me that this is part of cultivating. I mean, it's the end part of cultivating a plant, but clearly I don't know.
I think,
about
again,
this.
I
It
think
does
the board can
strike
talk to
me.
you a little bit about the testimony in the House was that there are currently some companies that are providing these temporary services during harvest time.
So this is like migrant labor coming through that's got a specific talent.
And they are coming in, so all the cannabis has to be harvested in the States.
Right,
And
yep.
generally at the same time, so you need a lot of workers, but they don't necessarily need to be there year round. And so they're providing a service. It's a temporary service, and to a cultivator who may not have the employees year round to be doing that type of work.
Got it. Great. Okay. That's,
Does Rutland have these?
yeah.
What shops?
Yeah.
Maybe not at the density.
Cannabis cafe.
They're all on Route 7 all the way down.
There are quite a few.
So next changes, we're moving to section 9, which starts on the bottom of page 14, and this is on cultivator licenses. And so you'll see the change on page 15. Currently, cannabis and cannabis products have to have a produced on date. And this is being changed to have 2 things now. So it has to have a harvested on date and a packed on date instead of a produced on date. Section 10 at the bottom of the page, and these are their propagation cultivator licenses. So these are kind of like the cannabis nurseries. What this section does with the amendment is it allows propagator licensees to sell to retailers. Because remember, in Vermont, you can home grow a few plants. And so this would allow a propagation cultivator to sell to a retailer so that someone could go into a retailer and, just like you go to Agway or whatever, buy some small plant. Section 11 is your new section on trim and harvest service license. Just that if you're a licensee, you can contract cultivators on a seasonal or temporary basis to supply certain cannabis maintenance services. Section 12 are the fees. You'll see at the bottom of the page in subdivision 8 is the new trim and harvest license of $500. On page 17, on subdivision 9 for employees, there is now the option with the new language for the board to offer 1 and 2-year employee licenses. It would still be an annual fee of $50, so it's not changing the financial picture there, but they could do it for 2 years instead of just 1. On the products, there's currently a requirement that for an annual product licensing fee of $50. So for each product that is being sold, they're assessed a $50 fee. The new language would allow the board to issue longer product licenses and for certain things that are shelf stable that don't need to be renewed every year. And then the last change on this section is, you might recall, you were here when you did the initial legislation, that the way that everything was kind of stood up with the initial program was kind of on a rolling basis for how the board was going to be issuing licenses. So everybody didn't kind of flood the 3-4 people who worked at the board with all of the applications at once. And so application periods were only open for like about a month at a time while they processed. But there was this fee that somebody who intended to apply could kind of hold their space when the application period opened back up. And this language just isn't necessary anymore now that we've got a few years down the road.
Okay, right. That we just need to finish the topic.
Yep, we're good, I can skip really fast over the tax sec. So page 18, section 13, this was something that was requested by the tax department. This allows a buyer to confirm that any business assets are free from tax liens. So if a business is being sold,
Right.
Page 19 on section 13A, this was added by House Ways and Means. And this language, my understanding is tax is already taxing these types of products, but they wanted to explicitly include some language in the definitions here of other tobacco products and new smokeless tobacco to capture natural or synthetic nicotine. And so I think their view is that it's just clarification language. They're already operating this, so it's not changing anything because those products are already being taxed, but they want to be very clear in the language and the definitions.
Right.
Then on page 20, section 14, impossible to tell. I realize by that language, but that's how we have to draft it. That's the repeal of the required auditor's report that was in the original 2020 Act. Remember when you created this at the time, there's a lot of discussion around what should this agency look like. Legislature chose to have it as an independent executive board. And at the time, the legislature put in language that said, well, let's see how that works. And then we'll come and circle back around. And my understanding is that the auditor of accounts has reached out and said, we don't really think this is necessary at this point. And CCB has its own consultant looking at that at the time, right now. And then the position is added in section 15 for the enforcement attorney. There's only one general counsel now within the agency, but then one attorney.
Right. Who we now have. And they have a new one.
Well, they actually got rid of the requirement. You guys got rid of the requirement that the executive director had to be an
Had to be
attorney.
the attorney.
But they do have a general counsel, but general counsel does things like rulemaking, a lot of those other things. And I think they're seeing a gap in because now that they have enforcement officers and they're doing a lot of compliance checks and
So
things like
an
that.
enforcement attorney is a litigator. I mean, what's an enforcement attorney? Somebody who just goes around looking at how to further enforce.
No, I think, if they have someone who goes out and says, you're not in compliance here, we find you in violation, we've warned you about this,
Right.
or whatever, and this means people have the right to appeal. If
So
there's a
there's-
violation, so there's a lot there, kind of, if you think about other agencies and attorneys within those agencies that deal with, are your licensees in compliance with the law, right? So maybe you have a compliance officer that says, this is the situation I'm seeing. I think it's a violation. They can consult with the enforcement attorney. Enforcement attorney can handle appeals.
It's interesting. I just haven't seen that term before. But, every day brings something new.
I'm sure once James is here, he can help fill in a
Thank
lot
you.
of the
This is a great start. This tees us up well. And I appreciate and thank you. Sure. So we're now going to, before lunch, quickly pivot to early college experience in Vermont, sort of building on what we heard about our first degree promise the other day and our workforce development. And we're going to hear from two young people, I believe.
Would it be okay if they both join you at the
That's a difficult for second
chair?
chair. If you could both be together, come and join us. And let's quickly introduce ourselves and then you guys introduce yourselves and tell us how you're using this opportunity. So Thomas, you want to begin? David, more to follow.
I'm Tom Chittenden. I represent the southeast quadrants of Chittenden County.
And Allison Clarkson, I represent, I'm one of three that represents Windsor County District.
I'm Randy Brock, represent Franklin County and Northern Grand Isle County.
Good morning, Dave Weeks, representing Rowan County.
And you are?
I'm Fiona Stoll from Montclair.
Good morning, committee. My name is Atticus. I'm from Middlebury.
Well, wonderful to have you both. So tell us how you are using dual enrollment or the first degree promise opportunity. Tell us what you'd like to tell us and where you are in your educational arc.
So I'm on my second year of the 3-degree promise. I started my senior year of high school. I think probably the important place to start is why I decided to do it in the beginning. And there's a ton of reasons, but the first one is like, as probably a lot of people who went through high school, I did not enjoy my experience in high school. It's just not a place for me. So I found it partially as an escape, as well as my junior year, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 leukemia, where I was like, I had to miss a lot of school. I was falling behind. My SAT scores were like abysmal. And I really needed a place where I could just focus on work and stop getting distracted by talking to people. Strangely, like when you're in high school, all I wanted to do was make friends and like goof off and all that. But I really needed a place where I could just sit down, do the work, show up, get the work done. And I went from a 2.8 GPA to a 3.8 GPA, I believe, which is like going from like, I had like 2 colleges I could probably get into to, basically any college I wanted, minus like, Ivy Leagues and stuff. So I think that's.
So how did you find out about this program in this very challenging time in your life? How did you find out there was an opportunity for you?
It's a little bit of a loss of time for me, but if I were to try to recall, it would either be from my friend Elliot, whose mother was an advisor for not early college, but people trying to, re-enter education. As well as like, of course, I think the school advisors are kind of required to tell, or at least they have agreements with the CCD to, inform students about this opportunity. So, and of course, my high school advisor was like, she saw my grades. She's like, I don't know, dude. So
Atticus, you're now at CCV full time as a student.
Yep.
Great. In your second year or third?
I'm in my second year, and I expect to graduate midsummer. 2 classes left to go.
Congratulations. What are you focusing on
Academically, on my transcripts, it's an associate's degree, a general associate's degree, but my pursuing engineering.
Oh, great. And do you think you'll go on beyond for further engineering studies?
Yes.
Great. Terrific. Fiona?
Yeah, so I was homeschooled up until I did early college at CCV. I started with dual enrollment my junior year, which is where you get 2 vouchers, about dual enrollment. And I got to take 2 classes my junior year, and I really liked it. It was a good challenge, and I was kind of just ready for the next step in my education and the next challenge. And I've taken homeschool classes before, but I had never been like full time in a classroom setting. So I wanted to see if I liked it. And I also wasn't sure if I, 1, wanted to go to college, or 2, what I wanted to study at college if I were to go. And so having the ability to, I ended up doing the liberal studies program at CCV, which allowed me to try a bunch of different things and see what I liked, was super valuable, to be able to experiment and still be living at home. And I'm a musician and pursuing my music at the same time. And yeah, so now I'm in my second year through the free degree promise, and I'm going to graduate in May with an
So you're
associate.
both second year at CCV?
Yes. Yeah. And I'm 1 year out of high school, and I'm going to have a 2-year degree,
Which is pretty exciting. And what's your instrument?
I'm a fiddle player.
Oh, great.
Mm-hmm.
A violin?
Yeah. Same instrument. Yes.
Played a little different.
Yes.
Wow. And what are your plans after you finish your degree at CCV?
I'm transferring to the Berklee College of Music.
Oh, great. Right.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, well, pretty great to go to Boston.
Yeah.
And Atticus?
I've yet to decide the school I want to go to, but it's either a school in Japan called Sophia University or ASU in Arizona.
Oh, great. Both with strong engineering programs, I take it.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
What area of engineering are you interested in?
Particularly aerospace, but mechanical is practically the same and it has a lot less requirements. So probably mechanical.
Great. Terrific. Because you have some places close by, like RPI and Rochester. I mean, there are a lot of good aerospace programs close by.
Yeah. A lot of opportunities.
Yeah. No, great. How wonderful. And just, given that you weren't in the school environment, how did you hear about this opportunity?
I think my mom heard about it from other homeschool families that are older than us and how great it had been for their kids. We had some friends that did it through the tech center in Randolph that really enjoyed it. And I'm not really a tech-minded person, so then we looked into CCV's early college program, and that seems like the one for me. Yeah.
Great. Any questions? Team?
Thank you for coming in.
This is great.
Thanks for having us.
And do you have a notion of how many other classmates or friends you've developed at CCB that have been able to take advantage of this incredible opportunity?
How many other friends outside of CCV?
Well, or who are at CCB, how many have been able to take advantage of this? Do you know other first degree?
Yeah. There's a decent group of us. How many do you think you would say?
There's 30 graduating in the CCB graduation in June. I know that this cohort is 30 of the pre-degree promise.
Right.
And then there's more students who are just the first year early college students. Yeah.
Right.
I would say the majority, I take my classes in Montpelier, so the majority of students I see in Montpelier are free degree or early college students.
Great. And Atticus, where do you take yours?
Most of the time I do online classes, and that's purely out of convenience. I just if I live in Middlebury, I can't drive up to most of the physical institutions. I've done a few times, but so I would say I don't really have an exact figure, but at least when I did physics in person up in Winooski, most of the students there were around my age, and I think probably 5 or 6 of us were all early college.
Great.
I think it's probably a substantial amount.
Great. Well, thank you both so much. It's always wonderful to put real people and real faces to the experiences that were being shared, that are being shared with us. And really lovely to have you here. Welcome to the State House. Is it your first time in the State House?
Yeah.
Good. Atticus, you?
No.
You've been here before. Great. Terrific. Well, and then I hope you feel comfortable and welcome.
Thank you for having us represent.
Our pleasure. Thank you, Rebecca, for bringing.
Thank you for having us.